Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Metaverse Musings. I'm very excited today to introduce you to the Webaverse team, who have been deep sort of in the trenches and on the front lines building, leveraging a lot of the sort of open standards and really kind of pioneering what the sort of open metaverse could actually look like. So I'm extremely excited to find the opportunity to chat to the team today. So guys, perhaps you could kick it off, each of you giving a quick intro, sort of high level on sort of who you are and where you fit into the operation. And then perhaps we can sort of touch upon the origin story of this whole operation.
Cool. I think let's start with Avier.
My story is really long, so I never know when to start these stories. But I've been doing open source Metaverse type stuff for the better part of a decade, and I've been programming for 10 years before that. So I've always been knee deep in this stuff, and through that I met a lot of really cool people like Jin, for example, through some of the open source projects and some of the communities that I founded along the way. And yeah, we've done a lot of stuff together. In the meantime, kind of collecting the best of the open technologies that we knew were going to be important one day. And then they did end up being super important in terms of now everybody wants basically their own metaverse. And that slowly evolved into a company. We got funded. And yeah, we're about to release our first products.
Super exciting. Jin, perhaps you could touch upon your side and your involvement.
Yeah, hey, so I've been lifelong interested in open source and decentralized technology, got into VR in the very early days, really want to, ensure that the future of the metaverse is open and, something that is, we have an alternative, platform in which, the users have control of. And so I've spent a lot of time like researching and organizing, what are the kind of ingredients we need to build this from and building. And me and Avier, we started a organization called Metaverse Makers. It would have 3 M's because we wanted to flip www upside down, but we couldn't decide what the last M meant, so we kept that silent. But it was basically a kind of a coalition of open source devs across like VR, AR, and working on peer-to-peer tech. And, through that, just kind of realizing also the importance of incentives to align creators building all this stuff. And that kind of brought us to like Web3 and crypto and the realization that this was kind of like the missing piece. And so my involvement nowadays is like, I'm like kind of helping guide a lot of like NFT projects to, as they kind of transition to 3D and more metaversey type of formats, upgrading from like 2D art to kind of more 3D, like metaverse native type of formats that we can use as building blocks in game dev and different applications, built on open standards that can be interoperable across hundreds of applications and projects, not just, NFTs in one video game, but something that can work across many.
Awesome. Love it. And Dan?
Yeah, that just brings to me, so I'm the last character in the Webaverse story. Product guy, worked in like big tech, consumer, got into crypto in 2014. And basically I could see this new super cycle which was coming, which was Metaverse, which was basically, like more immersive mediums. And I got interested in the space, and basically towards the end of 2020, early 21, a lot of practical writing and demos were coming out of Webaverse, writings of Jin, as well as, some demos, as well as recorded videos which were done as part of M3. I stumbled across one which was very inspiring for me. It was like freedom and association in the metaverse, in which basically Avier does a demo in which he goes from one game to another. This is a demo of 2 years ago. So he's going from like VR chat to Minecraft to No Man's Sky, and he's using NFTs, 3D NFTs at that time, from one game, inventory in one game to the other, and he was demonstrating it. And for me, it was just like mind-blowing. That's how I started talking to Avier, and basically right now I mostly work with Avier on the organization as well as the market side of things, whereas Avier is very much focused on the product. Yeah, and I mean, in a nutshell, when I started off and Avir told me that, he's trying to build this from open standards on the web, I did not believe it. I was like, okay, this is not happening. But as you can see right now, I mean, Avir's playing the game. This is all on the web, right? Like it's amazing for what we have already, I would say, like demonstrated the capability of having something like this on the web, because at the end of the day, the web is the most democratic medium, is the permissionless gateway, which we believe should be the foundations on which our future virtual world should be built.
Absolutely. No, I love it. And so maybe we could just take what was sort of like one step back and like perhaps one of you could give like a sort of, the 1,000-foot view, the high level summary of what Webaverse really is in sort of like the way you guys seek to communicate it. And then, I would love to dig into sort of, that kind of origin story and why web, basically. You touched upon some of the things there. But if we could start with just the high level overview, it would be, I think it would be useful for those listening.
I'll start with a quick high level one, and then I'm sure Avir and Jin will add to it. I think at the most basic level, we want to make something which qualifies as an open, interoperable metaverse. What is the definition of an open metaverse? Jin has been talking about this for years, so I think he's the best person to address it. And from Avir's perspective, it's more, how we can actually set up the foundations which could become protocols, not just like computer protocols, but also like human standard protocols on which, because once things start becoming in the form of protocols, just like a web page, right? Like everything is standardized, either a JPEG, either a PNG. That is what paves the path towards interoperability. And that's also what paves the path towards, being out of walled gardens. I would, leave it to Jin and Avir to add more flavor to this.
Yeah, I kind of define like what makes an open metaverse open. In short, freedom of expression. So like having the ability to have like custom avatars and worlds, and the ability to like transact freely. So having a neutral infrastructure for like payments, and which like crypto is the most neutral like rails to do so. And something that leverages interoperable open standards and open source, which leads also to like the right of exit. And this is a big thing in Web3, in which you can have like decentralized front ends to the same shared data layer. So if you don't like, for example, OpenSea, you can use LooksRare. Or, if the ability to bring your stuff from one platform to the next is like the idea of interop as well. And strong guarantees of privacy, which I think really boil down to like, do you have the ability to audit the code? Do you have the ability to run your own presence server, like the multiplayer server in which all of your kind of networking information gets sent to, and inspect what's going on underneath the hood? And Webaverse, I think, is the one project that checks all these boxes. I mean, if you look at the other kind of Web3 like metaverse offerings, they kind of lack in some of these departments. Like some might have custom avatars, but they're running like a native closed source proprietary Unity client, or don't even have the ability to import your own avatars, or like they limit how much space that you can build in, for example. And if you just like go by like what is open source and not, that really shortens the list down greatly to like however many fingers you have probably. And so that also gets down to like privacy and whatnot as well. And so I feel like it's like right now the best kind of like reference spec version of an open metaverse.
I love it. Yeah. And then sort of like double clicking on some of the kind of problems with these current systems, you alluded to even some of the ones that obviously lean towards this whole, crypto ecosystem where, in theory, a lot of these principles and sort of like philosophy is being embraced. But even there, you said there are some limitations to these, current sort of like early projects within this sector. Can you also talk maybe a bit, to the sort of, on the side of the closed metaverse, right? Some of the sort of failings of those platforms to your mind, and what sort of really drove that early passion in building and distributing via web?
I think one of the most important things which we're trying to do, and you can see behind Jen, there is a poster. Uh, the most important thing we see as any platform which is a metaverse is that it should be a platform for storytelling. It should be a platform on which creators and communities can tell their immersive stories. Um, and that's how like Webaverse is built. It's super easy to create any kind of content, any kind of experience, basically build your fantasies in it. And I think that's a very important part. It's not just the product, also the way we are engaging with the community. If you look at this poster, this is like completely organically, people just started building on top of it. And this is like decentralized storytelling, we don't own the IP of any of these characters except just one. Other than that, it's just like everybody, like the communities and the creators own these IPs. And we are very excited as to when we are going to launch our experience. It's going to be, a very exciting one in which, like all of these participate. And I think more than the product, it's about, giving the power of telling these stories to these creators and communities. And that's what Webaverse in a nutshell is, how easy it is for creators and communities to build. And it's along the same lines of, these great products like VR Chat, Minecraft, Roblox. These have, like made creators and communities, creators more specifically, um, mini studios, right? And I think we're just like building on that tradition, and we're just taking it a step further. We're just utilizing more technologies of today. We are utilizing blockchain and Web3 in a more, I would say, native way. So basically, like NFTs, like how we can use NFTs and the metadata in the NFTs to define avatars, weapons, wearables, pets, vehicles. And at the end of the day, it's all about being able to like tell immersive stories.
That's super interesting. Can you guys maybe touch upon also these sort of technical aspects and sort of challenges that you guys face in opting to go fully open standards and tie this all together in sort of like a a browser based kind of like web engine? I mean, it seems like a pretty substantial technical task. Curious if you can touch upon some of the primary points of friction there and sort of how you overcame those.
So I think there's a conflation of factors that really makes Webaverse make a lot of sense right now. One of those things is just the diffusion of browsers and GPUs, and the baseline level of technology has increased so much that basically anybody can render a pretty decent game on the web using all sorts of devices from your phone to basically everything. And I feel like nobody actually took this seriously and tried to make an actual game as a game studio on the web, and purely based on the open standards that the web is known for. If you just basically took all of these different assets and you mashed them together, can you make a game out of it? So we kind of took that and ran with it. And it turns out that the answer is actually yes, you can. All of the technology is already there. In fact, a lot of the technology that the other engines are using, like for example, Unreal, CryEngine, and Unity, they have a lot of open source components that they're using. For example, the physics engine is just PhysX. And we were able to basically just compile that to WebAssembly and run it in the browser. So we have a full physics engine that's basically anything that you're going to get with any of the other native engines. The avatar system was mostly a port from somebody else's open source Unity code, which was extremely rare actually to find because most people in Unity land don't really share code much. They kind of just share snippets on forums or try to sell it as plugins. On the web, that's not the case. On the web, basically one person can create a game engine just gluing together all of these open source pieces. And I feel like Webaverse is kind of at the intersection of trying to be open, good, and sustainable at the same time. And I don't think that has ever been done. I feel like every platform is kind of missing one of those pieces. They're either completely closed source or built on some proprietary stack somewhere along the chain where you just can't inspect things, you can't edit them, you can't drag and drop whatever you want, you can't build the experiences that you want to build. Or they're open, but not necessarily good because they didn't take it seriously as a game dev project. They didn't try to make the experience sufficiently fun for it to be worth using by anybody. or they're not sustainable. If you basically try to make things good and you try to make them open, but you don't actually pay anybody's bills, eventually that crumbles down. And Webaverse was, I think, born when we realized that crypto was actually the solution to all of this. That as long as you can fund yourself, you can make open source releases, you can make them absolutely amazing, you can make like products that people genuinely love, and it can work. And this can be the kind of movement that builds the metaverse that we actually want to exist, the kind of metaverse that people say will never exist because it's too idealistic. And we're at this kind of weird point in history where some of this stuff is finally becoming possible.
I love
That's
that.
how I see it.
And I think a very important point, which Aver kind of alluded to, is that we basically adhere to the philosophy, which is very inherent to crypto, is that open source everything but the token. And I think that's basically what enables these models to be financially feasible, and the power of networks to come in.
Absolutely. So I'd love if you guys could touch upon sort of how you guys are approaching that side of things in terms of how you've managed to finance yourself, how you plan to build some sort of like sustainability into this ecosystem. I think you guys might have some cool roadmap items that you might be able to share. I'd love if you could touch upon that in terms of how you guys have approached the economics of getting to where you are. And then, would love to dig into the actual platform a bit more.
Sure. So I think before I go into that, it's important to understand that Webaverse is actually like a stack of technologies. So at the most basic level, it's Webaverse, the game engine, which is built upon 100% open source ingredients and is a 100% open source game engine as well. It's, in my opinion, and I think it holds true, it's probably the best game engine on the web with the best possible gameplay. After that's the most basic level of stack. On top of that is a platform layer, a good analogy. So like the game engine layer, the analogy could be Play Canvas, Unity. Of course, it's not as feature packed as Unity at this point in time, but it's made for a specific purpose. Native for Web3 and also native for WebXR. WebXR enables us to have like AR, VR based native support as well. So basically, anything which runs, it's a URL which can run on your browser, either on the laptop, on your mobile as well, and then in VR as well. We already had VR, we have disabled VR at this point in time. Mobile support is also coming in. So on top of that game engine, the second layer, the stack, is the platform stack. So it's something similar to Roblox or Sandbox, right? But the idea is that how can users create user-generated content, and these user-generated content could be avatars, weapons, wearables. It's super easy to make things in Webaverse. You can just like drag and drop them in, as well as you can just connect your wallet and bring your NFTs in. I mean, it could be just a 3D asset. With the right level of metadata defined, you can assign and extend those properties to those components as well. So that's something which is like unique to us. And as part of this layer, we have other features as well, which is like social features, like we have text to speech, speech to text, as well as we have AI features, which includes not just like natural language processing, like locomotion, and all of those AI driven features as well. So all of these features we provide to the creators. So the whole idea is that any big centralized corporation like Meta or any big gaming studio, whatever they're going to provide as part of the centralized closed source engine, we provide all of that to any of the creators as well, right? On top of that, so this is the second layer, which is the platform layer. On top of that, we are launching with our own experience, which is Upstreet. And Upstreet, the best definition of it, I would say, is that it's World of Warcraft meets Roblox. It's basically where communities and creators have their own virtual worlds, have their own games. We help them build those, and then they are part of one meta game. We'll be sharing details of this publicly, in the next few weeks. We are looking to launch in, I would say, the next 3 to 6 weeks with an NFT drop. And the way Upstreet is going to progress is in seasons. And for every season, there's a season pass, and basically all the creators and communities that come in we help develop their experience. There's a period of development, collective development. We treat it as like, you treat a season, a show, and then after that, there's a gameplay season, gameplay period as well, right? So I think it's like the technology and all is fine, but we have given a lot of thought in terms of game design, and we actually want a fun experience, right? Like we want something which we would be playing, and we would be wanting to have fun. Like we want you to be having fun as well, and not just something which is on the laurels of some sort of cryptonomics. So that is what we have, in terms of the vertical stack. Other than that, we also have a marketplace. We have a Discord board, which I would say, is something which has more features than Collabland, which basically enables these creators and communities to have token gated access, etc., of their experience within Upstreet, as well as like community based voting decisions, etc. What else? And then we have like creator tools in the pipeline. For example, we have a Unity exporter coming in. We have level editor. Right now, there's like an in-game drag and drop kind of stuff. You can just drag and drop assets. You can bring your NFTs in, and you can just create your experience. And when I say you can bring your NFTs in, it's not just like as 3D assets. You can actually bring them in, and you can like with simple low code based editor, you can just define them as a pet, you can define them as a weapon, and like those stats are already assigned. That's and the way we plan to make it sustainable is actually the long-term vision is to actually create a sustainable economy within Webaverse, and that is how we want to make it sustainable. And the economy, how can that be created? It's created through good content. It's created through supporting the right creators and communities. That's basically the model on which we're working towards. In the short term, we are actually seed funded. We got funded in January 21. Like some of the crypto native VCs have backed us, and I mean we're very thankful to them. It's it was basically like a bunch of people just found like Avier and Jin doing cool shit, and they were like, okay, here's this money, no strings attached, to like change the world. It was like that kind of commitment. I mean, I'm sure like Jin and Avier will have something to add to it.
I just kind of want to comment on the street Avier's on, and one thing that really inspired so many of us was the book Snow Crash. And when everyone talks about Metaverse, I'm like wondering, have they read Snow Crash? Because there's this concept of the streets, and here we are like building like grids, so we kind of thought about it okay, what if we actually build the street? And what if, each season was like a block that gets connected, we could literally it's like a literal blockchain then, in a way. You can go forwards and backwards in time. And it kind of, I think, is also more easily understood by people coming into this ecosystem where they're it's Webaverse, right? Like 3D internet. Well, what we're doing right now with websites is we're scrolling up and down, but what if you could scroll forwards and backwards? And that's what Avier is doing right now. So I feel like it would be much easier for people to navigate, and kind of something that threads the needle between all these worlds. Upstreet is kind of like that open source Disney kind of production studio that's collaborative, and we're finding a way to kind of weave these narratives and lores all together. Kind of reminds me of Smash Bros in a way, with that main gameplay that weaves all those Nintendo characters.
Yeah, no, I love that. I also love, obviously doffing the cap to Snow Crash with the street. And I think it totally makes sense and is super intuitive in terms of how, it evolves outwards and almost chronologically. And you can kind of gauge where you are in terms of the evolution of the Webaverse universe based upon, where you are along that road. It's really cool. I love that.
I think one aspect of Webaverse that hasn't been covered yet is this is kind of our secret plan, but I don't think it's very much of a secret plan because it's also the plan of Mark Zuckerberg, which is really that, like, I think the metaverse is also going to be hugely defined by AI and the power of AI in terms of what it gives people in terms of creation tools and so on. So actually, all of this is hooked up to GPT-3 already, and every single NPC in the world has their own personality that's just kind of defined using, again, web standards. What that allows us to do is, I can't actually show you because this hasn't been approved by OpenAI yet, but you can talk to characters and basically have a full RPG type experience where not only do you have your own items, but other characters in the story have items. You can bargain with them using crypto that's on chain to essentially have a full game made out of user-generated content. It's actually really easy to set this stuff up. When you mint yourself an avatar, or any other object for that matter, we're going to have a bunch of wizards that will walk you through the process of creating whatever it is you're trying to create, whether it's a Yeti or any sort of crypto idea that you have. You'll be able to basically select the different options, the different types of actions that your character can perform, as well as their stats, and define their lores. And all of that gets mixed into the engine where it turns into a full RPG experience and your NFTs really just come to life. I think, I wish I could really show some of this stuff, but I think that's going to open up a lot of eyes to the power of the web and what collecting a bunch of standards combined with AI can really do for game creation. I think it could be revolutionary.
That's amazing.
I mean, I can attest to it, basically. I think it's just going to give so much power to like individual creators and communities. Like we like like the results which we have seen is basically, like people will be able to like create their end-to-end like full RPG experience with very least amount of effort, right? And I think that's what metaverse is, right? I think the metaverse is immersive stories. And that if we combine with creator-driven, community-driven lores, I think that just becomes super engaging, and I think that's also something which we are lucky to, like found like a good organic community and people are building on top of it. I think the stories are what's going to define the metaverse, and it's extremely important that these stories are owned by people. They have a high sense of ownership in it, because that's what's going to add the diversity and color to it. If one person just like builds it, it's just going to be homogenous, right? Like whatever it is,
Right.
even if it's good or bad, it's just going to be homogenous. And I think and people like I mean, you've been in crypto, I'm sure, like you follow crypto Twitter, like some of these lores like the Wassies and all, right? Like they've just been like so organically developed. Like I don't think like a writer like can just like come up with it. Because
Right.
like they're so community driven and people relate to them, like people like relate to them every day of their lives. And I think like being able to like bring those stories in a more immersive way, that's what makes like the whole experience so much better.
Right. I totally agree. You can't really compete with the grand sum of collective creativity and ingenuity. I'm a big believer in obviously giving tools to builders and providing and facilitating creative freedom. One of the things I wanted to ask is obviously you're sort of like seeding this whole. I mean, you're sort of like seeding the first experience, I guess, with this Upstreet project. Like, what can we expect in terms of timeline for like opening up broadly to creators? Like, maybe you could even show us like what the creative process looks like currently. Ava, it would perhaps be cool to run through. And then we'd just love to get your thoughts about the sort of transition towards, I guess, almost like more professional creators coming towards this platform. Obviously, especially in crypto, we've seen like very strong like developer incentives in the form of grants and trying to attract people to places like Decentraland and the Sandbox. So I wonder if you can comment on that model and, where you think it might have merit and sort of like how you guys are approaching that angle.
Sure.
So mostly, we've just started with the tooling that already exists. Like we were really surprised to find out that the tooling, like basically first-class tooling, exists outside of these game engines and the likes of Blender and just these standards that are developing. So actually, it wasn't that hard, especially with the Japanese community and what they've been doing with, for example, the VRM standard. There are standard ways of just developing 3D models that look absolutely great, and it really just takes a professional to go in and use these tools professionally, but they're all completely open source, and they can rival anything that you can do in any other engine. So we've just been leveraging all of the tooling that already exists, trying to build plugins and making sure that everything kind of works seamlessly, and also really taking seriously the feedback from the people who've been making this stuff for years, whether that's for VR chat or other platforms. We want to basically be where their tooling is. We want to write the plugins, so it's really easy to just export all of these things into standard formats. And once that's done, it's been actually surprisingly easy for us, but once that's done, it can be brought into Webaverse, and basically you get the connective effect of being able to use any asset along with your NFTs. And basically, this also comes with a community that's doing the same thing. We're all kind of building out the street, so to speak. The way that we're setting it up is there's not only going to be multiplayer and first-party parcels, kind of procedurally generated Minecraft-y, Fortnite-y type gameplay, where you can kind of go on procedurally generated quests throughout the street. But each section of the street is also going to be a parcel that can be claimed by users who are playing the game. And you kind of have to rush to get there because the first person to claim it gets whatever loot is on that parcel. And on top of that, you can build absolutely anything if you've claimed the parcel. You can even replace the entire gameplay with something else if that's entirely your own thing. And the cool thing is, this becomes part of the entire metagame of Upstreet. Everybody is kind of running around the street trying to get to where they want to go, trying to get the latest loot, which, by the way, is completely on-chain. We actually run our own sidechain, so you don't even have to have a MetaMask account or anything. You can just kind of log in with Discord and manage your assets through a Discord bot. But essentially, we're creating this first-party experience where that's the reason that everybody's kind of there. Like, there's some awesome gameplay to be had. But also, if you don't like any aspect of the gameplay, whether that's the characters or the world itself, you can rebuild it to your own making, and you become part of the game that everybody else is playing.
I love that. It's really fucking cool. I also love that in terms of like a distribution mechanic for like the world building, right? It's like people that are actually engaged, as you say, the kind of race to find these parcels and kind of claim them. I think that's really cool. I also like what you touched upon in terms of, leaning so heavily into these open standards, even down to the, like the humanoid avatar formats, like the .vrm stuff. Like, it's, there's that great Chris Dixon line that, composability is to software what compound interest is to finance, right? Especially for you guys, assets and stuff only ever need to be sort of invented once. So you'd expect the speed of creativity and the building of all these worlds to be, massively accelerated versus these like top down efforts. Super, super exciting. And so you mentioned you've already got a core, sorry, go on.
Yeah, just to add to that point, right? I think one important aspect of Upstreet in terms of creator-driven content, and that just like blows everyone's mind from creators' perspective, is the drag and drop functionality. Like you can just drag and drop assets in, you can build your world within it, and you can just drag and drop assets, and like you would be able to like define them as weapons, wearables, pets, etc. Right? Like that's just opens a completely new level of ease for creators. Now that's on one end of the spectrum, right? Another end of the spectrum, what changes the game for us is the fact that we are open source. So what happens is that, for example, anything which we make is there. Like, for example, I create any kind of vehicle, right? It's there. The code is there, and we have already seen that, hackers are going to hack, modders are going to mod. They just pick up that and they create like 100 different iterations of it, 150 different iterations of it. And that's the whole point of the season. We create our own first-party experience. We lead the way, and, we try to create a great standard, and everything is open source. It's commercially licensed, available to anybody who is, part of the ecosystem. They can just create that code and create like 100 different, iterations, variations of it, for their whatever they want, for their own stories, for their own virtual worlds, right? So that just gives you complete level of customizability. So on one hand, you have like the very basic beginner level experience in which you can just drag and drop them in. Then you can either have a level editor or Unity exporter, or you can just go down to the code and just look at whatever we had, and you can just change a few parameters and create your own versions of it.
Right. No, it's super cool. Sorry, I'm getting somewhat distracted by these glowing orbs and things over here with Ava. So you guys mentioned as well that there's already an existing sort of organic community building in here. Like, yeah, I guess you're going sort of like much more public now, especially with the launch of Upstreet. Like, what's kind of the roadmap both for, I guess the player perspective? I guess what do you guys want from players? Like, how do you want people to come and engage with this sort of first party experience? And on the other hand, obviously, as the builders of these worlds, right? I guess like what's your hope for the next 6, 12 months from each of those, different sort of demographics, if you like?
Yeah, I think the first hope is from builders, and I mean, Jin is one of them. So I'm sure like Jin can speak on behalf of the builders, is to, and I think a lot of crypto OG builders, like they just like these platforms anyway. Like that's why, like a lot of people are, even right now, they're building experiences on Webaverse, right? Like even though the tooling is not complete, they're still building it. I think the appeal to, and like the expectation from builders and communities is to, like take it seriously and build something which is going to be, like aim for an experience which is going to be standard setting. Like I think any kind of experience can be made, and when we say any kind, we need to be aiming to compete with established games. I think that's the kind of tooling and the gameplay which we are providing, right? So I think all the creators and communities need to do is like just take that seriously and have that ambition. From the user's perspective, I think it's just about having fun. Like I think that's the only expectation to have. Obviously, we would love like open feedback and all. But at the same time, we're doing this as a grand experimentation. Like that organic community driven lores coming up. So that also, the expectation is, or at least the request is for everyone to come up with an open mind and, participate in this grand experiment of like, what will come out of these collective stories. Because I think an open mind will help us go a long way.
To add, I would say when people are creating, they're creating things in like 3D as models, like as GLTF, avatars as VRM. And so they're going to work just here very easily, as well as many, many other places. And I just love how like the tooling is like being met and where people are already creating, like that really lowers the switching costs for as many creators as possible to build things and bring them to life in Webaverse. Like, for example, it's just kind of like you can connect things. Like there's a editor that's coming back called Editorverse, in which it's like leveraging the same kind of like editing workflow as Mozilla Hubs. And then like with the Unity one, it's like leveraging the same kind of workflows as like VR chat. And with just, a few steps, you can also bring it to the web, and the effects are positive some, like you can bring more kind of distribution and eyeballs to, like, for example, your VR chat world, if it were able to be viewed on the web with like autonomous AI NPCs there chilling. I just like the composability aspect of how like the pipelines are made, because other platforms there you have to basically relearn everything to build on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love it. And Jin, you've been, you're actually the person that introduced me to Webaverse quite some time ago. I think you guys were operating under a different name back then. I don't think you'd settled on Webaverse, but you've done a great job in terms of documenting all of the discussions over the years. I know, like, you guys have done these awesome sort of like metaverse outings, if you like, where you guys have all gone and explored different worlds and seen, which mechanics are interesting and things like that. If you were to give some advice to someone listening in who's been inspired by what they've seen and excited by what you guys are building, like, where should one even start in terms of approaching this, understanding the importance of these open standards, like, skilling up themselves so that they can develop these things? Like, how would you approach it if you were sort of like starting out here?
I would say start with your avatar. Make a VRM avatar. There's free tools that you can download, like Vroid Studio, for example, and tutorials. And when you start out with your avatar, like, I think the open metaverse kind of revolves around one that is like very user centric. And then like from there, just drag and drop it in to test. I love using Webaverse to test like VRM. It's so fast, and it has like all the features working like as better than other stuff I've tested. and then go through the docs and like you'll see sections like create a weapon, create a pet. I'm right now like working on some pet stuff, but there's like some templates and you can like look through examples that have been made as well that are linked in the docs, and just kind of like approach it kind of like from a modder perspective. You could just kind of like mod things and create your own. Like there's an example for a very simple flying pet, a hopping pet, a biped, 2 legs, 4 legs, whatever. And so you can kind of mod your way to creating really cool stuff.
I love that. I'll also drop your Metaverse resource list in the show notes, because that's a personal favorite. There's lots of great stuff in there. So yeah, I wanted you guys to touch upon it. So we kind of talked about how players should and could engage, how developers can kind of get started. I'd love to touch on, like, I know you guys have already started exploring, true to the ethos of crypto, basically integrating certain like NFT projects. I think you did some stuff with nouns, for example. Could you maybe talk about, how you guys are thinking about tapping into these communities, and, if there are people listening who are leading some of these projects, how they might get involved?
Yeah. So there are two components of it. I think first of all, we want, and we are already in conversations with a few projects. The treasuries are going to participate. So the treasuries want their own, virtual worlds or like entire experiences to be built as part of the meta game. And we basically are going to help them with everything, right? Like, which includes the 3D avatars, the world building aspect, etc. What is extremely important for people to realize is that whatever you build here is yours, right? Like, you can literally, like exit anytime you want. It's all on open standards. So, there's like, you can exit anytime. Moreover, if you want, you can even like host your own parcels on your own server. Furthermore, if you want, you can even fork the code, right? So I think that's extremely important from these communities' perspective, because they can have a long-term incentive to build on this, right? Like they can know that, okay, whatever they're building is there to last. The other stuff is, so this is like from the community's perspective as a treasury, right? But I think even the individual community holders, we would like encourage them to like participate in the NFT drops. And like, for example, some of the NFT projects, they grant you commercial license. Some of them are CC0 anyways. So with these, the community members can start to, like build their own stories, which could be, multitude of what the founders or the community as a whole would have even thought of, right? And that's also, we are having a few conversations. So for example, nouns is a very good example. Every noun has its own story or characteristics associated with it. So, you could basically build an entire new experience with it, right? So yeah, I think these are the two main aspects. And it would be, it's like, like a Marvel universe in which we get an opportunity in which these characters which we have created in our silos get to meet. So, it will be very interesting when, a Wasi meets a noun, and, that we plan to have like, not just the game, but along with the game, like a storyline is also going on, and and some animated short films are also coming out, some comic stuff maybe as well. But we want to keep it wild and experimental. I think that's where the real fun is going to become. It has to be treated through and through, as a production experience with an open mind by all the participants. I think that's what's going to bring in the flavor to it. And that's what's going to give a much richer experience, because other stuff has been tried before, right? Like, but when everybody starts participating in this collective story, that's, I think, what we are looking forward to having.
Right. No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I'm excited to see it all come together. And then Ava, maybe you could touch upon where we are in sort of Webaverse's technical roadmap, I guess. It seems to me that you guys have done a great job, like tying all of this tooling together. Like, is the focus now primarily on the first party stuff on Upstreet, or like does the engine and the platform itself sort of have like a more substantial evolution to it?
No, my priority right now is to essentially support the drop and show people what we're giving them. Basically, enable parcels to work. So one of the also kind of touching on your earlier question, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about in terms of communities, or like the best idea that I've heard, is some of the communities kind of want to race to get a whole bunch of parcels next to each other and kind of build their own district within the game. And a lot of people have just kind of taken initiative and forked the code, and like they're starting to build all this stuff. So my priority right now is kind of glue this all together so we can start kind of interacting in multiplayer. And then after that, we're probably going to start working on the season 1 stuff for Upstreet. But that's probably going to come together actually pretty quickly. A lot of the stuff I can't even show right now. But we have basically all the assets, and the engine is nearly ready to plug all of this in together. So that should actually come together pretty quickly after the drop. But yeah, right now I just kind of want to plug everything together, make sure that the street works, make sure that we can kind of explore all these things that people have already made.
Like working on the tech before doing the drop, like working on a product before dropping tokens. What a breath of fresh air! Just gotta say,
the antithesis of the current era of crypto. I gotta commend it. No, it's exciting to see. Could you guys maybe just elaborate on what people can expect for this drop? It feels like a pretty core milestone as far as someone wanting to get involved and sort of like understand more about this world. So could you guys sort of elaborate on what can be expected from this drop, and also timings, I guess?
Yeah, timings are going to be 3 to 6 weeks. We are not trying to we are trying to have the drop as a community experience as well. Basically, the whole purpose of the drop is to attract builders, communities, and storytellers. And the idea of the drop is that you are going to be one of the owners of this storytelling. Like you have you are participating in that storytelling of that season 1, and you have an equal contribution to it, right? And these could be very different. Like the expectation is not just that they need to be like NFT communities. They could be like individual creators. They could even be like artists. Literally anyone. And in terms of the drop, it's an NFT drop. The NFT drop is basically the season pass. You get the season pass, and with the season pass, you're able to claim any parcel of the land. But along the season, you basically get airdropped a couple of cool stuff, which is what is going to enable you to build your own games, as well as your own virtual productions, right? And along the way, we'll be doing a lot of these production ourselves, so that people can just look at it and they can create 100 iterations of it. Yeah, and basically the way it's going to progress, there's season 1, and then season 1 is followed by season 2. The earlier you come in the ecosystem, the more weightage and the more chance you will have to participate in the ecosystem throughout, like in terms of successive seasons as well. I think that's how we are looking at it. As of right now, we are specifically launching with just the non-fungible token, but expect other stuff as well in the future.
Understood. And then I guess question for any of you guys, but perhaps sort of Ava and Jin as well. Having spent so much time sort of on the front lines building this thing, like, what do you guys believe that success looks like for Webaverse? It feels like you guys aren't necessarily optimizing for, any sort of value capture dimension here, which is very, very exciting and refreshing to see. Like, is it measured in terms of user numbers?
I would actually disagree with that. I think we're working on the ideas that are ultimately going to win the world. We're thinking on really long time horizons, because in 10 years, I feel like the world is going to look very different. If you just look back at what's happened in the last 10 years and how technology has evolved and the surprising directions that it's taken, I think the forces that we're tapping are going to be some of the most important forces out there. And And I think like ultimately this is the kind of thing that's going to revolutionize the world. I think ultimately everybody's going to move online, or there will be some online avatar metaverse component to everybody's lives. Just like we had the evolution with the internet, where basically everybody in the world, now over half the world, literally has a smartphone.
Absolutely. So yeah, when I say it feels like you guys aren't optimizing for sort of value capture at this stage, like you sort of disagree with that. So could you maybe talk us through like how value is going to accrue to the platform as this universe expands? Because we haven't really touched upon that. Would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Two things. First, I'll answer the first question, what success is going to look like. I alluded to that before, but I think success is going to look like that. Two aspects to it. The first aspect is that within Webaverse ecosystem, we have a thriving economy. I think that's the main thing for us to focus on. And I think an economy needs builders and an economy needs consumers. So both sides of the equation, right? Like you just have to look at it as any IRL economy. The other stuff is that success for us would be that, like other people are building, or at least, thinking in terms of these open standards, are building these interoperable virtual worlds and metaverses, and so that interoperability is actually possible. A lot of people say that like interoperability is not possible, etc. We know it's difficult. We know you have to hack your way to achieve it. That's the whole point. Like good things are supposed to be difficult, but we want to like actually work towards that. The other point which you're saying that like how value is being captured in terms of the platform, I think we strongly believe that the next 2 decades is going to be a battle of two worldviews. It's going to be like one worldview is going to be a battle of abundance, and the other is going to be a battle of scarcity. We are team abundance. We do believe that you can have a completely open source and everything, and the value is just going to accrue through the token. Either it's non-fungible, it's through fungible, and basically you keep on creating or delivering that great experience, and that's how the value keeps on capturing onto it, right? Like I think and it's very simple, it's like it's in the ethos of crypto. So that's why we treat the token and the stakeholders of the token very seriously. That's why we haven't launched anything before we had a product. Like we really wanted to set the bar that this is what you're going to get, and based on that you get the people who actually want to be part of this network of building this open interoperable metaverse, or the foundations for it.
So I guess I'm struggling to see in the scenario, like, Ava alluded to people already having like forked sort of the code and sort of running with it to try and, build and cater to their communities. Like in a scenario like that, how is a token going to be weaved across those two separate now separate experiences to accrue to a single token?
Sure. At some point in time, the token holders will have more rights to certain aspects, more commercial licensing aspect as well to certain aspect of the platform. That's one. Secondly, like these things cannot be copied. Like it's simple as that. Like even though you can keep the open source, people will fork it. But it's about not what it is right now, it's what it's going to be in 3 months' time, right? And time again, we are open source. There are other people who have, definitely forked the code. But at the same time, I think overall the value does go back to you. If in nothing else, not even if you're thinking financially, I think in terms of goodwill, it's so underappreciated right now. Webaverse, and it's all due to the good work of Avier and Jin. We have so many backers and supporters. They have no vested interest in us. Like even if you just look at our account, like randomly, like people will like retweet us, or people will talk about us, or people would like to mention us. I think the amount of goodwill which is generated is overlooked, and I think it is. And all of these, at the end of the day, flow back into the token as a financial incentive. So that's our take on it. And like Linux is a good example. It's open source. Like other versions come out of it, but at the end of the day, the main product is the main product.
Absolutely. No, it makes sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Here's my opinion on what success is probably going to look like. I think us and Mark Zuckerberg's team that he's trying to build at Meta are kind of trying to develop the same thing. We're trying to build an awesome metaverse that a lot of people want to use. I think ultimately it's going to be the technology and the quality of the output that determines who actually wins this game. And there's probably trillions of dollars up in the air. And there's two features that we can have. We can have one where Mark Zuckerberg kind of controls this top-down thing where somewhere along the line, the taxes need to be paid in terms of freedom, in terms of money, in terms of control. And there's going to be this weird power structure that kind of nobody wanted, but that is now forced upon them. So what success to me looks like is if like Mark Zuckerberg started copying not only a lot of the ideas that we're using here, but just basically Webaverse in general. Like if Mark Zuckerberg literally made Webaverse, that would be complete success to us because that's the best version of the metaverse. That's what we need to be building. And I think that product, whatever it ends up being, is kind of going to win the world. And that's why I think the token is super important. It's working together, making sure that everybody is kind of rewarded fairly. And that includes the people who are building the foundational technology, but especially the creators that are kind of backing the technology itself and putting their valuable time and energy into building basically the best version of the metaverse. And success to me would be basically Mark Zuckerberg tomorrow announces Webaverse.
I love that. I love that. So yeah, you touched upon there again the token in terms of the creator context. I sort of asked earlier that, you know, like Sandbox and these other platforms are sort of giving out lots of like developer incentives and almost like grants. Like, how are you guys thinking through that for, let's say, your, you know, Genesis creators that are really here, like building and really committed to it over the next 3, 6, 12 months, right? Like, how are you thinking about like distributing that value to them?
It's simple. It's simple. They get a free participation in the platform. So we have a token pool which is reserved for creators and builders, and they get that. So
there's a second part to this. Since we are treating this as a serious game dev project, and essentially the assets from these communities are the main ingredients of it, we're working hard to essentially plug everybody in that we can. Basically addressing all their grievances like, oh, like this format doesn't work, or we want this token to work. We've built out the technology that can basically make all of this seamless for creators. And we're taking a really hands-on approach in terms of, okay, what's the kind of game that you want to make? What's the kind of features that you need in order to make the kind of game that you want to make? Let's make something super awesome. You have the token. We're all in this together. We want to help you succeed. And I think that's how we can win together.
A way to think of it is that basically, like all of these creators are basically like gaming studios and we are the game engine, right? So, but unlike game engine, they all get to directly, participate in the game engine's decision making, and we basically work towards that. So it's a much tighter bond in creating those experiences.
The role of Upstreet in all of this is kind of just to be a lighthouse to inspire people and to build out the technology and just show people, hey, this is what you can do. Swap out the assets, reconfigure it, add some more stuff, and now you have your own universe. Rather than just kind of saying, here's some tools, dump your own models in there.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask as well, sort of like following up from that, was, you mentioned sort of like trying to address all the grievances of these communities. Like, what would you say are some of the more like universal or fundamental trade-offs that you feel like you guys have had to make in terms of, going like a browser-based build?
I don't think many trade-offs were made, except perhaps time. This project has basically been the culmination of at least 7 years of work of open source software from a lot of different people, not just myself. Most of the code is just open source things that have been released by people smarter than me, like the physics engine, for example. I actually don't think that that very many trade-offs had to be made, other than it just took somebody with a lot of love for the project to go and build something that can actually pass as a game that, hey, this is something that I actually want to play with or without crypto. It's just an actual good product. And I think we're even going to have to make less and less trade-offs as we kind of move down the technology roadmap. It seems that the browser is here to stay, and especially graphics in the browser. Things like WebGPU are on the rise. Right now we're using WebGL, but WebGPU is a relatively low-level technology that gives you graphics capabilities that are pretty much the same thing that you have on all the latest consoles, even. And it looks like that's even going to be supported by Reality OS or whatever thing Apple's going to announce at WWDC 22. So it seems like we're on the path to becoming a better and better platform. And we need to make essentially no compromises at this point. Every single language, every single format, we want to enable that. Whether that's native code that's compiling down to WebAssembly, whatever model format you have, it can essentially be plugged into the web and it'll work.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, in short, the hard work, we have already done that, or the people before us have done that. I think for the creators and all, it should be a much easier experience.
That's super exciting. And then, yeah, I guess like sort of following up from that, like it feels like there's a really exciting confluence of sort of forces at play here from some of the technical parts you just touched on. You earlier on at the start of the podcast mentioned obviously just the sheer abundance of like compute power and how all of that's on the rise. But what do you think have been the primary impediments to this whole notion of like the 3D internet or the embodied internet sort of taking off so far? And what is it like about, now where we find ourselves that's sort of unlocking all of this stuff?
I hate to say it, but I think the answer to both questions is crypto. In the sense that crypto is such a powerful force, but it's such a misunderstood one that despite the fact that we've been making this stuff for like the better part of a decade, people still come, and we haven't I haven't personally dropped any tokens, but people still call me a scammer. Like, I mean, this is the longest scam I've ever heard of. So on the one hand, like crypto is probably the thing that's going to enable all of this to work, but it's also so misunderstood that it's been hard for us to get our message across through all of the noise of Discord spam, of Twitter spam, and some actual scams that unfortunately chose to exit rather than follow through on their ambitions.
Yeah, and I mean the answer to it is, Piers, like we have already seen, right? Like when we thought about metaverse, like some people might have thought that it would be top down, coming from like Blizzard or like big gaming studios, but it's coming from digital assets. We are already seeing like a very healthy digital asset market / NFTs, which is already there, right? Like people are already creating and associating with the digital identities. Look at Jin. I mean, he is a digital identity, right? Like his identity is this avatar. So these things are, I think, and crypto has just given boost to it, right? Like everybody now has a PFP. Like the financialization of it is just taking it to a next level. Whether it's good or bad, I'm just saying that the adoption is crazy. Like just last year, like basically everybody has a profile picture now, right? So it's already one step into the metaverse.
Absolutely. Maybe a bit of an annoying one. I'm sure you've been over it 1,000 times before, but I wonder whether each of you have a sort of go-to in terms of defining the metaverse. Right? I mean, if you had to distill it down to its essence in terms of what's important to you, what would it be for each of you?
I guess, I can go with the definition that I described of what constitutes an open metaverse, being freedom of expression through custom worlds and avatars. And that is something that I think both it's the common ground between crypto and non-crypto users. And then you got to have the freedom of transaction, freedom of speech and privacy, association. And I think that really boils down to what are the ingredients it's made out of, you got to read the food label when our digital future livelihoods depend on it, and so if the ingredients, if there's view source in there, this stuff is merging with AI. Glasses aren't going to just be glasses. They're going to be extensions of our bodies that we wear all day. And if we're going to merge with AIs, I want to make sure that, I kind of understand what's happening in the background processes and not always being connected to the botnet per se,
Ava, how about you?
I think the metaverse is ultimately inevitable, and it's hard to say what ultimate shape it's going to take. I hope it's the open one, but I don't think it's a question anymore as to whether this technology is going to exist. And one of the kind of wild cards here is AI, and I do think AGI is probably coming within the next 1 or 2 decades for sure. And that will basically revolutionize every part of technology ever. And I just want to make sure that by the time we get to that point where these AIs are advanced enough that they're basically ruling over our lives, that the future that we're living, the immersive future, whatever it ends up becoming, is a good one. And so I think the metaverse is inevitable. I'm more interested in defining what is like the good metaverse, and that's a story that we're writing.
I mean, from my perspective, the metaverse is just when we start giving more value to our digital time, which is already happening, right? So it's like more immersive space-time presence. And there are several corollaries which come out of it. How much is your digital spend going to be? And that's also increasing, people are buying JPEGs. So like all of these things, I don't think there's like a line that, this is where metaverse was not there and now metaverse is. It's like gradual transition and it's already begun. Yeah, and like for me, what is important, and I mean, Jin has alluded, I think, and it's crazy when people don't understand it, that the human freedom we see today in physical world is a very new phenomena. 2-3 centuries ago, most humans in the world were properties, right? So it took us a time to like get out of that. Like you were subjects, right? Like either subjects of monarchs or slavery was rampant, etc. I think when we are building the metaverse, it is extremely important for us that we preserve those rights into these virtual worlds as well. Like the same thing as like freedom of expression, right to own, right to vote, like all of those things need to apply in the metaverse as well. Maybe
Absolutely.
even better, maybe if nothing, like maybe we can break down a few more boundaries while we're doing it. But I think that's very important for people to realize that, like just by moving from physical to virtual, we shouldn't be compromising on the stuff which we have already won in the physical world.
Right.
I don't even
right.
think it's much of a compromise. I think we can make better products on open
For
standards.
For sure.
I love that. Bullish open standards. And then, yeah, Jin, Ava, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there. Like, you're talking on sort of 10, 20-year timelines. I always like to take a step back and, really reflect on it in like the broader context of where we are heading as like a digital species, right? I don't know whether there's any other commentary you want to provide on, what it looks like in 20, 30 years when, the vast majority of our waking life is spent in virtual environments and worlds. Like, is that something that it seems as though it's something you're both extremely sort of attracted to as an idea. Just wonder whether there's any thoughts you can share at a high level around that.
I've been pretty much on the internet my whole life, so it feels like I'm already like digital native, and I feel like in 20 years or so, we're not going to be browsing these websites on flat screens anymore. And distance is going to be pretty much eliminated. You can get way better networking done in the metaverse than probably the physical world. A lot's going to upload online, including the physical world, because all the, pretty much most of the big tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Apple, they're 3D scanning and creating a spatial index of like Earth, and they can build on top of that layer. Right now, we've seen a lot of like fantasy like virtual worlds being made, but I think these fantasy virtual worlds, we can sandbox ideas that can also be applied to these 3D models of like physical places and then layered on and then visible through AR devices. But before that, we'll be, experimenting with alternative realities in VR. And it's just going to be a fascinating time where like, I truly believe now is the beginning of a new renaissance. And the ideas that and it will inspire the physical world or have inspired the digital world, really came from, I think, pop culture, and we're not uploading digitally, but now like digital culture is on the rise. And I think it's going to become dominant in 20 or so years. Like esports is going to be probably bigger than meat space sports, probably.
So I'm a huge believer in Ray Kurzweil's idea of the law of accelerating returns. I think it drives virtually all technology, and most people are blind to it until it's too late. I grew up at a time when the internet was not a cool thing. Like I was the nerd, I got bullied because I was programming all day and my parents didn't understand it and so on. But now like everybody wants basically a piece of the internet. Like basically crypto work is the coolest thing they could possibly do. So I think in the future, people are really going to be surprised how technology evolves, especially things like AI and the multiplying effect that all of these things have on the world. I think in the future, it will be essentially impossible to interact with the rest of the world unless you have an AI on your side. And that can either be an AI that really is trying to help you, and it's an AI that is aligned with your values, whatever that means, whether it's trained on your data, whether it's something that you own, or whether it's something that's hosted on your behalf. But the capacity of those AIs to help you is going to be something that basically defines your entire life. And I'm scared of ending up in a future where that AI is constrained to think about the things that only somebody with profit or other ulterior motives wants me to see. I mean, you're seeing that really plainly already happening. Like basically what TikTok is doing, like with the different sides that Russia can see and the Western world can see. It's like absolutely different content. But we've built up these crazy walls that are only possible because people haven't basically been empowered with these same tools that we've been building and centralizing with these massive corporations. I want to live in a future where that is basically diffused to everybody. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised how big of an effect basically the law of accelerating returns is going to have with AI when everybody can access essentially the sum of human knowledge instantly, basically have AI companions, basically be able to do absolutely everything way faster, way better than you could have done it alone. And I think it's almost going to be impossible to interact with the rest of the world unless you have AIs on your side. I want to make sure that they're really awesome and hopefully cute.
That's pretty exciting. I love the energy for it. Yeah, exciting times ahead. Curious to see what it all holds. I wanted to ask each of you, maybe we'll start with you, Dan, but one thing that you wish you knew before you sort of started on your whole crypto journey, what's one thing that's kind of become clear to you that you wish you'd known back then?
I think one thing which I would have known that, like at the end of the day, coins are magic, but the magic holds in the people who believe in it. It's at the end of the day, it's less about the conviction or about the fundamental technology of what is driving those. It's more about that, what's the narrative and how many people have the conviction in it. I think that's what would have been very helpful for me because, like I would like, and I think that's the most important thing, right? Like, what's the narrative of that coin? What is the conviction of the masses in it? And I think technology and all, I mean, they're just part of the equation.
Probably something similar to me, like the power of storytelling and how fundamentals sometimes just get thrown out the window, in favor of like just really good kind of like lore. I don't know, like I never predicted some of these projects to see the success that they're seeing right now. Like just based on like, I guess, some things that are, you can't like, I don't know, I middle bell curved a bunch of NFTs during my years. Like, what are the fundamentals? Like, does this have utility and blah, blah, blah. But, sometimes just people like the monkeys or sometimes people just like the art, and it's like, yeah, that's been a real surprise. And still to this day, I feel like, well, I'm learning, I think right now, like I'm trying to show people that it doesn't just have to be a static image. You can bring in, it doesn't have to even be your avatar. It can be your pet that follows you around. And some things are more ready than other projects and making that transition from 2D to 3D. But yeah, it's just wild how like, logic, you can't always rely on logic and fundamentals in this space. It's imagination and stories.
I was mostly
100%.
surprised that that nobody else basically thought to do all the stuff that we're doing. I think most of these things are super obvious, But I also have to balance that with the fact that I was actually pretty surprised when Zuckerberg announced that his company is becoming Meta. I actually thought we had a lot more time before, like, basically these people would declare that these are their ambitions. Yeah, it was kind of something that kind of kicked our ass, but it definitely surprised me. I thought this was like going to be something that happens in 2025 or something.
Very cool.
The language he was saying too, like he was saying all the right words. That was like military grade psyops. Like the whole introduction to Meta and the name change. If you just go back and like read the script, I was freaking out. I couldn't finish the video.
Yeah, it was pretty strange, I got to say. Just when you thought he couldn't get any stranger. But there you go. I wanted to ask each of you as well. We'll do some sort of like quick fire questions here. I suspect I know the answer for at least a couple of you here on this one, but what would you regard as the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oof, that's a tough one. I mean, I read Snow Crash twice. Can I pick one more? I mean,
yeah, do it. Take as many as you like, dude.
Snow Crash, Uduru, the whole Bridge trilogy from William Gibson was really dank. I'll just stick to those two. Those were pretty great.
Mine would be The Power of Now. I think that would be the most impactful book for me.
Man,
yeah, it's a good one. I read it some time ago.
I would also concur with a lot of what Jen said, but I'm going to go for a weird answer because I think the most formative book series in my case was Animorphs. It was a really weird series, essentially. It's about these kids that transform into animals. And so that's the initial draw. That's why I got into it. But it turned out to be a story about basically war crimes and kids dealing with existential issues, like with aliens and all sorts of stuff. And the parents were completely blind to it. They thought that we were reading essentially books about kids having adventures turning into animals. But it was like serious sci-fi. And that kind of set the stage for me reading Snow Crash later and realizing that, hey, like these fantasy worlds are actually super awesome. And this can be an escape for people who feel misunderstood in an era where the internet is not the cool thing to do.
Interesting. I like that. I've not actually come across those books. I'll investigate. Similarly, maybe we'll just do the same order again. Similarly, what would you each regard as your sort of favorite game ever?
For me, that's probably Smash Bros. It's the ultimate crossover game. It ties everything together, and I just like how like freeform jazz it is compared to other fighting games. Like you create your own fighting style in Smash Bros. It was super moddable also, and it still has like an active modding community, so you can like bring in your characters there. And I feel like that could be like a catalyst for like Avatar and Trop, like a really fun game that everyone wants to be like a part of, like getting the invite to Smash was like whole part of their like marketing strategy, like who's going to be next and people like creating memes around that. But yeah, I love Smash.
All-time favorite, FIFA. Nothing beats that.
I become enraged like no other game I've ever played playing FIFA. I actually had a pretty sore loss. I think it was 7-2. I lost last night playing against Jan. It was pretty tough, but anyway. Ava, how about you?
I was too young to kind of be hit by the Doom craze, or it somehow passed me by. But the game that kind of like sold me on games being the future was Half-Life and Half-Life 2. And I actually discovered Half-Life 2 first, Counter-Strike, the entire mod community there. I still remember the day when I was waiting kind of on Steam for the files to unlock and play the game. And it was the best thing ever. It was everything that they promised it was going to be. And out of that, basically, we got the entire modding community. All of Steam basically had its genesis in the release of Half-Life 2. So it's probably that game for me.
Pierce, just to add, I mean, I gotta say, like RuneScape was definitely the most influential in my, in terms of crypto. Like I learned everything about, like, I owe so much to that RuneScape game for teaching me like how to avoid scams and like the value of like things that are scarce, like party hats, for example. I was really good in there. I grinded to like 99 range and I went out PKing with a party hat. Anyways, great MMO, browser based too.
RS Chad, you're pecan with a party hat. That's some risky stuff, man. You like to live life on the edge. That's a lot. That's a lot. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I talk about it all the time, but that will forever be Yeah, pretty fundamentally important game in terms of all sorts that it taught me growing up, and similarly sort of led me to crypto directly as well, which is great fun.
You'd be surprised how many.
And then sort of going perhaps
yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. There's a whole army of them on Twitter. The RS Chads, they're out there. A lot of time for it. So perhaps moving a bit beyond games, or that might include one. What would each of you regard as the most impactful digital experience you've ever had?
That's easy. For me, it's gonna be Ghost Club in VR chat.
Yeah, there's this whole underground VR. Yeah, there's an underground rave scene in VR chat, and if you can make it into the main instance of one, it is probably I would say a spiritual experience to make it in there. It really, it's pretty immersive.
Yeah, it's a psychedelic experience.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like you see that, and then you'd be like, okay, I'm excited about the metaverse.
Interesting.
I think for me, it's hard to say. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I randomly followed one dude in VR chat one day and ended up in some club, which was pretty cool. But I don't think it was this Ghost Club. It definitely wasn't the psychedelic experience, although I will most certainly investigate.
It's a Japanese community, but yeah, it's a great experience.
I would have to say probably just hanging around with Jin. He'll take you to all sorts of crazy places in VR chat.
That's true.
I remember actually this was at the launch of their Udon scripting system in VR chat, and there was basically a world that they designed to just showcase some of the new features. And I think one of the founders or some of the key people from VR chat were there, just kind of hanging out. So I got to meet, I don't even remember his name. He's the alien guy from VR chat. But he showed us, Ron. So Ron showed us around for hours, through the best of VR chat, becoming all sorts of avatars and literally giving us trips, all sorts of psychedelic experiences from just the avatars and all the things that people have built in VR chat. It was the most memorable thing. And it's I totally remember being there. It's the VR effect of full immersion. I remember meeting you. Even though I've never met you, you're the alien guy.
Totally, yeah. I've had a few weekends, few evenings in VR chat where you meet someone and they show you how to glitch out of a map or do all of this stuff, and they're always countless hours of fun. So no, love both those answers. Jin, as a master of VR chat and all things virtual, who spends most of his time operating through the web, what would you regard as the most impactful digital experience you've ever had?
I would say, I'm not sure if this is the most, but it was definitely up there. So a couple years ago, Avia was working on a demo of custom avatars with full IK in the browser with WebXR support. And it was simple, it was you could upload an avatar and then you have this mirror and it was multiplayer. And it was this black void. But it was it hit different because you knew that you were that void was the internet, where you were, and not just on some application, that you downloaded from Steam, it just was you kind of stared into the void and the void stared back into you kind of vibe. But that was the vast internet, beyond, and this was all open source stack. It really hit different. I got a video of when we were testing it and we were discovering how to scale ourselves big and small, perspective wise too. We could shrink into a tiny fair and you would see everything huge, and then you would shrink huge, and then you hold another person in your hands kind of. It was crazy. But yeah, amplified by just what it was made out of was it took you beyond.
That's awesome. I'd love to check out a video if you can share it at some point. Seems like a pretty awesome experience. I love that idea of the void. It's always resonated with me. Guys, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on and talking through all the exciting stuff you're building. I couldn't be more excited to follow along and sort of see this vision starting to come to life. I'm sure everyone listening will feel the same. For those that are inevitably on the edge of their seats with anticipation for all that's coming, where's best for them to follow along? Which sort of social channels, where do you want people listening to go to keep up to speed with all things Webaverse?
Twitter. So please do follow us on Twitter. We do an open development, so we share a lot of stuff. Some of it might feel like spam, but you can ignore that. And also, please do go ahead and follow Jin as well as M3. They're doing some very cool stuff on avatar interoperability. Jin can probably add a few lines to it.
Yeah, Thank VR on Twitter. And you can, we have events and whatnot. We are right now really focused on avatar interop. So if you have like a project you want to bring to like the metaverse, hit me up. If you are working on other aspects of avatars like animation and whatnot, also hit me up. That is all related. Wearables, fashion, also avatar related, hit me up. Thank VR.
Same. Any creator, any community, they want to build the experiences which they truly own. Please feel free to drop in our Discord and say hi. We'd love to help you and support you. For the same stuff as like avatar wearables, you can say hi to us as well. We'll probably just refer you to Jin. We work closely together with M3.
I would definitely say follow the Twitter. I'm actually planning on streaming a lot of development going forward. That's going to be announced on our Twitter as well.
Yeah. So Aver will be doing like live long hours of streaming sessions. So I think that should be fun as well.
Very cool. Well, guys, thank you once again. As I say, I'm extremely excited, extremely bullish the open metaverse with folks like you sort of leading the charge. Extremely excited to see how all of this stuff evolves. I'll be following along eagerly. And hopefully we'll find an opportunity in the future to have you guys back on and talk about how things have evolved.
Thank you so much, Piers. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Have a good one, guys. Ciao.